Hello and welcome to day 9 of our virtual pilgrimage. If you remember yesterday, we were in the area of the temple and we'd set off early in the morning. And as I say, that was just the beginning of a very busy day. And so I'm going to take you through quite a few different bits this morning of places we went to next on that day. So let's just get the screen up. There we go. So we left the area of the temple and our guide said, I think we're ready for somewhere to stop and have a drink. I know just the place, he said. So we went through the streets, which at that point were quite quiet, as you can see there. And we came to this, I think it was an Austrian convent, where he said they'd give us a nice drink. And we got there, it was shut. And we were all so disappointed. And he said, I can't understand it because it says here they open at 10. At which point we looked at our watches and it was only 9:45 in the morning. So hence they weren't open. It just made us realise how much we'd done so early in the day. But they did open up and we had a very pleasant courtyard there where we could have, I think it was iced coffee and strudel because it was an Austrian one. And they were so pleased to see us because we were one of the first pilgrim groups that had come through for quite some time. So after we'd had that refreshment stop, we then moved on to another spot where there were two things. This beautiful, well-kept courtyard of the Church of St. Anne, which is one of the best, apparently, remaining churches from the Crusader era. And this is called the site of St. Anne because reputedly it was built on the site of where Mary's parents, Mary's parents, Anne and Joachim, had lived. It's a reputed site. But also on this site was the place where the pool of Bethesda was. If you remember, Jesus healed a man there. And this was an amazing archaeological site. And the actual pool was now some 10 meters below today's ground level because so much had been built on top of different things. And those steps there would have been steps that maybe were the ones that went down into the pool. This is a much better picture of the site. And this was, the excavations began in the 1950s, where they found the remains of a large 5th century church that had been built over the original pool. So we went round, had a look round this site. It was incredibly hot because there was no shelter. And somewhere up behind where we're looking there now was the place, again, I think it was a convent, where we went for lunch before we began to follow the way of the cross, the Via dolorosa. And in today's Jerusalem, it's quite hard to work out where this all might be. So I've put up a map that I found, which gives you some idea. So we're just beside the temple area there. The Antonia fortress would have been where Pilate was. And then you can see the green streets marked there that took us to one of the supposed sites of Golgotha, the site of the crucifixion and burial of Jesus. So where we'd had lunch was just by the fortress. So our first picture there is from the stone floor of the fortress. And if you look carefully, you can see there games scratched out on the marble floor that represent where the Roman soldiers would have been. And like any soldiers, they make their own entertainment and games as they go along. And so this was the first part of the Via dolorosa, because this, of course, was where Jesus was condemned to death and went on with his cross. And there are 14 sites of places where he may have stopped. And that first picture is of the street that we came down from the fortress, and we had a couple of stops along there. And then this was this was stop station number 3, where we stopped. And at each station, we stopped briefly and had a reading and a prayer. As you can see from that picture, you've got there in the front of the picture, actually, Derek and Sharon, who were leading the pilgrimage. But of course, there were loads of other people there. And we were in a busy area. Here's some pictures of what that area was like. Busy, bustling, vibrant, so many different things for sale, from rugs and hats to fruit and jewellery, just so much. And yet here we were trying to continue on our way, and we were the back markers for that trip, so we stayed behind. So in front of us there on that second picture is all our group, and we were there to make sure that nobody got left behind, because it wasn't a straightforward route to follow. And eventually we came to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and that is the most confusing building, I think. And so I managed to find on the internet a cutaway picture of the building, because within this church we have the site of Calvary and the site of the tomb. We will be returning to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on another day to look properly at the inside when we went there on a quieter day. But you can see that the site of Calvary and the site of the tomb are very close. We always knew it was close, but I'd never really appreciated just how close it was. And some queen, in their wisdom, in about the 5th or 6th century, decided to cut away the hillside and to make this into the site where you could see where it might have been that Jesus died and was buried. So the picture on the left there is of the entrance to the church, and the one on the right is the sort of covering within the church of another church that was over the site of the tomb. The first picture there is an altar built over where the site of Golgotha might have been, and you can see somebody there bending down because it was covered in glass so that you could see where it might have been. And then this picture, the second one, is the array of oil lamps over the site where the tomb might have been. As I say, it was quite a confusing place to be. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today as we go into our time of morning prayer. In the name of the searching Father, in the name of the servant Son, in the name of the purging Spirit, in love's name, the 3 in 1. Amen. On this day of the Saviour's Passion, let us be one with him in his wounds. We seek to tread in the steps of Christ. In the steps of Christ, our champion and king. He has shown us the way when strong, when weak. He is our master in everything. And a time of confession. May I weep for pride and loose talk. May I weep for the blame heaped on others. May I weep for things I clutch at. Strip from me, O God, pretense and divided loyalties, grudges and compulsive habits, unloving relationships, self-sufficient attitudes. May we weep for our hollow society. May we weep for neglect and brutality. May we weep for blighted lives. May Holy Jesus pardon us for these sins, free us from these evils, and power us into new ways. Amen. We're now going to have three readings that take us through those final hours of Jesus's life. And I'm taking them from Mark's Gospel. The soldiers mock Jesus. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." We found it quite striking as we were walking along the streets as a pilgrim, trying to pray at each of the station spots, while the bustle of the ordinary life of the city went on around us. It was quite challenging. But when you reflect, you realise that was exactly how it would have been. For us, this was the once-in-a-lifetime experience of following the way of the cross. For those in the city, they have pilgrims along here all the time. It's an everyday occurrence. As we read the account of Jesus walking from the Roman palace to the place of crucifixion, we often imagine everyone stopping to watch as the criminals go past. But actually, this would have been an everyday occurrence for them too. Maybe not every day, but certainly not uncommon. We think about the place of crucifixion being outside the city, maybe on a green hill. And many of our pictures reinforce this. And it would have been outside the city, although the place was not outside the city now. It wouldn't have been far outside, and it was unlikely to have been green. Crucifixions took place where people could see. The bodies left often for days to die a painful death in full view, so as to act as a deterrent to others considering committing crimes. Perhaps a bit like in our country in the past, the heads of those executed would be placed on the railings of a town as a warning. But I want us to reflect for a moment about Simon from Cyrene. Cyrene was an important city in Libya, North Africa. He had come a long way to celebrate Passover in Jerusalem. And I've particularly chosen this picture because it's more than likely that he would have been very dark-skinned, and not, as many pictures portray him, as white. The Gospel of Mark includes the tantalizing information that he was the father of Alexander and Rufus. These were obviously men known to the people to whom Mark was writing. And so we presume men who became followers of Jesus after his death. I know this is all supposition, but I don't think it's too fanciful to think that their father Simon was so impacted by his contact with Jesus as he carried his cross for him, and then presumably stayed and watched him die, that he subsequently became a follower of Jesus and his two sons as well. At this point in the account, Jesus has been up all night, been interrogated, beaten, humiliated, flogged, and now forced to carry his cross, which would have weighed about 30 or 40 pounds. It was not surprising that he fell under its weight. He would have been in a debilitated state, and yet something about him must have reached out to Simon. We can only wonder if Jesus said anything to him, or whether it was just something about his dignity, despite what was being done to him, that made a difference in Simon's life. Whatever it was, the meeting with Jesus on this first Good Friday made a life-changing impact on him. And so it should be for us. If we think seriously about what Jesus endured and the fact that it was for our sake, then, like Simon, it will have a life-changing impact on us. And so we turn to prayer. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place the broken, the wounded, the hungry, and the homeless. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place those who have been bereaved or betrayed, those who have suffered loss of health or esteem, family or friends, employment or home. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place unwanted babies, children abused, neighbours defamed, lovers spurned, spouses deserted. Christ of the scars, into your hands we place those who are victims of violence or vandalism, false accusation, or sharp practice. Lord of the scars, we entrust them all to your loving care. Amen. Father, in the life of Jesus, you have shown us the way. Give us his spirit of self-discipline. Lead us more deeply into the way of the cross. Before his hands were stretched out on the cross, they were stretched out in love to children, men, and women. May your way of the cross be our way, that we too may stretch out our hands in love to all. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. And that wasn't the end of that day. We then moved on to the site, another possible site of the crucifixion and the tomb of Jesus. And so we'll be looking at that tomorrow.